ARRI just changed hands for the first time in 109 years. The most respected camera brand in cinema now belongs to one man, Thomas Riedel, the founder of broadcast technology giant Riedel Communications. In this exclusive interview, we got 45 minutes with him and ARRI managing directors Chris Richter and David Bermbach here at the ARRI House in Las Vegas. A more affordable ARRI, the camera roadmap, what's really been going on since the strikes. Nothing was off the table.
You're watching CineD, supported by B&H and CVP.
I'm honored here to be with the ARRI management and also the new owner of ARRI, Thomas Riedel, here at the ARRI House in Las Vegas. So thanks for taking the time. Now, it's been, 5 days since you signed the contract, so the ink is still wet. How is it for you? Do you still pinch yourself in the morning, realizing that you just purchased probably the most legendary name in cinematography?
Yeah, well, it's the reactions were overwhelming, and we signed on Monday night after a very long notary session, and the week before I wasn't even sure, will this really happen now? And I'm super happy. Many reactions from all over the world. Many people sent me messages. I heard from people I didn't speak to or heard of for many, many years, and now they say, "Oh, congratulations." The nicest one is really that all the reactions, whether they came from inside ARRI, inside Riedel, or outside the world, there's only positives, and I'm super happy about that.
I think it's also a very unexpected ending for ARRI, I think, because of course, I mean, with everything that's happening, with all the changes in the industry, a lot of consolidation happening over the last couple of years, I think a lot of people were fearing that VC funds would come in or, like foreign investment, but particularly maybe somebody who's an outsider. And I think it's a bit of a relief, of course, that you as somebody who founded and built their own company and is also from Germany took over. So unexpected in a way, yeah, I think, for the industry.
Well, yes. Certainly I looked and looked up what was written in the internet in all these forums, and basically lots of names popped up. Ours didn't, and we were monitoring that for the last couple of months, and I certainly liked the fact that no one really knew it. However, there's a number of cooperation projects we started together already, which was kind of hinting to this.
Take us back a little bit. You had a long history with ARRI, already kind of going back to more the beginning of your career, the early days of Riedel Communications. So when did the connection start?
Yeah, I know ARRI lighting from really my hobby time when I was 15, and here and there I was allowed to use some theater spotlights, which I got as a loaner. So that's how far it goes back, and I always loved those spotlights, and I felt that, well, too expensive for me, but I love to work with that. And then a little bit later, I always tell the Riedel story about the milestone around the Olympic Games in Lillehammer, Norway. What I typically don't tell is it was ARRI to pull me in. And that is something which now closes a circle, and that's so nice, really, almost emotionally for me.
Your entire career has been in live production, broadcast, and sports, but ARRI's reputation was really built on narrative cinema. Cinema in general, but specifically narrative cinema, on feature films and premium TV. Does ARRI's cinema business excite you just as much as the live production? Because I think that's the only worry that some people in the cinema community have.
People shouldn't worry about that. I'm a huge fan of the movie industry. I love Hollywood. We are already involved more than people think with our Riedel products, like our wireless Bolero intercom. It's used on so many very high-level productions. But I really love that industry, and we will continue being a player there. We want to be the top player in that market, but we want to add something, and that is also important, that we add the live and broadcast side of it. And Riedel is in that business. ARRI is on the other side. So basically, we are super complementary, talking about marketplaces, but also looking at the products and the technology. It is highly complementary.
Let's talk about the market reality of the cinema business. I mean, that goes to all of you. I mean, we all know that there's been fundamental pressure on the market for the last couple of years. After COVID, there was a boom in COVID, and then there was really the strikes, and everything just almost like grinded to a halt overnight almost. And it's been tough for especially manufacturers of high-end cinema equipment. Now, a lot in the market have reacted with, we see some of the competition. For example, there was the takeover of Red by Nikon, probably a bit more focus on more budget cameras. Everything that was released since then is below 10,000 euros or dollars. ARRI is still way far away from that. And, you know, us as CineD, we are really all about, we started this website originally as you know, like, what, 16, 17 years ago. There's people who are trying to make DSLR cameras work for cinema. You know, like it was a budget way of, and people exchanging themselves and reporting the news. However, ARRI, of course, having the best image science and most beautiful image, it was always aspirational for everybody. So the hope has never ended that ARRI will finally release a more budget cinema camera. Is there hope in that?
There's always hope in that. Of course, we will stay in the very high end or the top end of motion picture. We believe that this is a market that is not just our home, but also part of our future. There will always be a market for the best image, the best cameras, the best systems in the world. Nevertheless, we completely acknowledge that the industry is changing. So not only are we going more into a system integration and solutions field, both in live and in motion picture, because that is much easier than to integrate into modern cinema production. But we also look obviously at the lower end cinematography, but also not just because it's a different market, but it's also the next market. It's the next generation of filmmakers. Nowadays, the people don't start with a 16mm camera. Well, they obviously start with their cell phones. So everybody who shoots starts with cell phones and then grows into a more prosumer and then professional world. And therefore, we already have partnerships, as you might know, and we nurture them to offer some of the qualities that ARRI has also to entry-level cinematographers or producers. So the best image, the best user experience, the best workflow for this environment, we will make available from cell phone all the way up to the high-end motion picture cameras.
Okay, curious what's next. Do you want to say something to this, Chris?
So David covered this pretty well. I think it is very important that you capture the new filmmakers, emerging filmmakers from the very beginning, get them into the ecosystem. There's a lot of opportunity. It's really down to making sure that, you know, the image and the image processing and the quality that ARRI stands for is available, and that's what we're working on. And there are exciting projects in the pipeline.
Interesting. Which we probably cannot go into that much.
Not yet.
Okay. You've said before that you believe the future is about end-to-end solutions rather than individual products. If I'm a DP on a set with an Alexa 35, what does that mean for me in practice? Or what can it mean?
What I learned from my field around life and entertainment is it makes sense to connect things. Some of the features are very obvious. Some others only come up with using that possibility. But if you think of, like, you know, radio technology, RF is a strength of Riedel, and we will give those technology building blocks over to the sister company ARRI. So there is possibilities of connecting, and think of, like, what could you do if all the elements in a set are now wirelessly connected and exchange, whether it's just data, control, video, audio. That can be very interesting. And I believe that it can also be interesting to have the video you are shooting already available somewhere else. Even so, the video is recorded in the camera. But it might be interesting to still have maybe some producers not on site seeing what is shot. And again, these are just little examples, but I personally believe there's lots of opportunity in that field, and that can help to do things which have not been done so far, and it can also help to streamline and make things easier.
Well, a good example, I think, is ARRI has always been on the side of the DPs in the sense of keeping control of the image, where we saw SDPs kind of losing control over the last decades, because, of course, with grading and everything, it's like there's less budgets of keeping people involved. So like the ARRI looks in camera, you can now kind of define this in camera. And the textures, I think, in the Lexa 35. So this is just, like when you mentioned before in the press conference, actually, that like maybe even controlling ARRI lights through a camera could be something that actually gives control back to the cinematographer, who in the past few years actually tend to lose it, unfortunately.
It's too. Now, at the moment we are in this situation that higher efficiency and more industrialized workflow are happening with the big studios. And we believe that it's our task also to ensure exactly the creative freedom of the cinematographers and the creative people. And the way you do this is not to fight against more efficient workflows, but to make them more accessible, more easy to use. And especially networking, communications has been, on my sets, always the biggest trouble in the last years. It gets more and more convoluted, it gets more complicated, more errors happen, so reliability is going down. And those workflows can be dramatically improved if we have a good overall solution. And this goes all the way to direct to cloudification, so that you can have actually available the footage faster. You have faster turnaround times. As a DP, you can see the results, control the results easier and more efficiently, and you don't have to think about the technology. I think the idea for us is you build a bubble of technology around the creative people so they don't have to worry. We worry about technology.
Nice. Something that struck me while preparing for this interview when thinking about both companies, me honestly as us as DPs and filmmakers not knowing too much about Riedel, only that every time we walk onto NAB, there's this huge booth at the beginning of Central Hall, and we, like, what is this? Now we know. But I found it's curious that both ARRI and Riedel are not only manufacturers, but have this huge services business. There's ARRI Rental, with locations around the world, being one of the probably largest cinema rentals in the world. But also Riedel being very deep into the events themselves with kind of staff and the technology. So it's not just a provider of the hardware. Do you see a lot of ways to combine here? Because I think that kind of is unique. I can't think of any other, at least camera manufacturer, that has like a huge rental division, for example.
Yeah, that is kind of unique. Having said that, it's also different. On the Riedel end, we always look at not competing with our clients. So rental companies around the world buy equipment of Riedel and use that and rent that out. And what is the service division of Riedel called Managed Technology is more looking after clients who need either a huge quantity, which is not available otherwise in the market, or a complexity. So basically, if you think of Formula One or SailGP projects we are deeply involved with, and you need something which other players simply can't do, then this division comes in, but not really to compete with our clients. And it will be very interesting to see how we can also change this a bit on the ARRI side. If you ask me how, I don't know yet. This is all work in progress. But I think there is so much opportunity in that thinking for ARRI as well, rather than just thinking of like, well, let's sell equipment and let's rent it as well. I'm not a strong believer of that.
Interesting. Yeah, of course. I never thought about the fact that actually then ARRI ends up competing with their own clients. Yeah. Here's a funny coincidence. We as CineD are the official behind-the-scenes partner of ARRI, documenting the Eurovision Song Contest, which we're very honored to do. We've already shot a few days in Munich, and now, of course, Vienna is really getting started actually this weekend with build-up of the cameras and everything like that. So, and you already mentioned that, of course, Riedel is also deep integrated in the Eurovision for years. So how did this cooperation come about? How did you manage? Because I think you said you were the initiator of actually getting the ARRI cameras into the Eurovision.
Yeah, well, now I can talk about that. Basically, I was already in the process and was kind of hoping that the deal we just announced would going to happen. But, you know, I took the risk to say, I see an opportunity now with Eurovision Song Contest in Vienna to already bring ARRI cameras in that spectacular music TV production. It is, in fact, the largest music TV show in the world. The Eurovision has also a huge legacy. I was talking to people from Austrian state broadcaster ORF. They are great Riedel client for many, many years. In fact, one of my first clients, I can tell. So I know the guys very well. I inspired them with the idea of bringing a cinematic look into that production. They liked the idea. I made the connection with ARRI. We discussed together what can we do, and they ended up with deciding to go for that. Now that this is just a few weeks after the announcement is in a way coincidence and luck, but I'm super happy about it.
And it should be the perfect advertisement for the integration, right? Like the combination.
Oh, absolutely. Because, I mean, we will have all the Riedel technology up and running there. We will have 26 Alexa cameras in that live environment. In my mind, there's no better showcase. And yeah.
And I can tell you from NEP, who do the live trucks, last week they were actually said, no problem. It's the same as integrating the broadcasting cameras, because that was interesting for us to hear that it's no different for them.
Yeah, NEP is the broadcast production company doing the Eurovision Song Contest this year, and this is a great company, also a long-standing client of Riedel. And so basically, it wasn't too hard to convince them that this is a good idea. There were some, exactly concerns about the complexity of the integration, and I'm glad to hear that now after they did it, they said, no, that wasn't hard, we just did it, and now we're only awaiting the result, but I'm sure it will be great.
Yeah, we are curious to film what's happening. So Chris, since the strikes, ARRI has been through a period unlike the last 109 years, I would say. I mean, Claypacky was sold, 150 jobs had to be cut, I think 2 facilities were closed. And then, of course, there was a Bloomberg report kind of leaking that ARRI is for sale. So production volumes in general in the industry have not recovered since the strikes and not since COVID. And you've had to manage through all of that. So now there's a new owner with hopefully deep pockets and a different strategic partnership. But what can you do now what you weren't able to do over the last couple of years?
I mean, you touched on it, right? It has been a really challenging time for the industry, not just for ARRI, but essentially everybody who is in that business. So for us, years ago, we already decided to go more into live entertainment to make sure, other than motion picture, we have a really strong footprint in a different segment. And obviously with Thomas now owning ARRI and Riedel, that gives us a fantastic marriage of technology, of access into different market segments, into different markets directly, and combining those two is going to be extremely powerful. It's also extremely powerful to have somebody with the background of Thomas, as an entrepreneur, building up Riedel, having proven, to build it up from scratch, into what it is today. That this is, exactly the legacy that we need, that helps us at ARRI a lot, and it also creates that vision and the focus for the future, where we want to go as a company. It's just mentioned that the integration was already recognized as not being that hard, getting ARRI cameras into a live segment. Now, I would claim that most people know us for a really good image, But when it comes to integration into live, they're all like, ooh, you know, how tricky is it? Because as you know, as well as we do, you know, a black screen on a live production is obviously not what you can afford, you know, at any point in time. So proving that this is actually working well, that we have done some groundwork, and now being able to open up the segment with a very strong footprint and dedication is really exciting. So for us, this is a really good new start. We also see the industry, motion picture industry, recovering. The dust has settled to a certain degree. It doesn't look like there was another strike upon us, because the contracts, particularly over here in the US, with the screenwriters, have been signed. They need to be ratified now, but you know, it's all heading in the right direction. And so with the clear vision now, how we're going to go forward with a new owner structure, with a shareholder like Thomas, we feel extremely encouraged and very excited about the future.
Thomas, on the OMR podcast, I listened to that while flying over. You did a conversation with Philipp Westermeier last year. You said that you would never sell Riedel because, in your words, I'd be sitting on a sack of money, and I would be sad. So, and I don't know anyone who says selling was a good idea. So now you're actually buying from a family that just sold. This is also a personal acquisition, 100% of your own capital, no venture capital. What did you learn from the Stahl family about why they made the opposite decision, and why did you structure this as a personal investment rather than a corporate one?
Well, I can't talk about what's going on in that family. That's not my cup of tea, to be honest. Even so, certainly I saw certain things. I can talk about my own view on that. And like I made those statements about Riedel and not selling, I'm here with ARRI not just to do a quick turnaround and sell again. I'm here for a very long time. And, my main concern is my own age. I'm 58, and how long can I be fit enough to help drive this? But definitely no plan to sell this, but to build something very sustainable for a very long time.
I think one thing people outside of the industry don't always appreciate is how much ARRI's influence also comes in through education. The ARRI Academy has actually trained generations of cinematographers, I would say, and our own educational arm, MZed, education platform, has been the exclusive online home for those certified courses for many years now. So that pipeline matters. You train people on ARRI systems. You talked about the next generation being more accessible with ARRI systems. And ideally they become ARRI users for life. I think it has worked for the cinema line for sure, for a very long time. With a new owner, does this education strategy expand? And does Riedel's own client training infrastructure play into that? Or is it just too early to say what happens about education?
I would say it's a bit too early to say. To be honest, I didn't even know much about that. I learned some things I didn't even know. That is the honest answer. But what I can tell is that education, generally speaking, but also in our industry, is super important. And I'm very committed to that. We're doing that on the Riedel side. And what I just heard, I'm very pleased with. And of course, we want to continue that and, if possible, expand, because it's always about the next generation. And again, that's a generic statement. It's not about one industry. It's about humanity. And absolutely, we need to educate people. I mean, if people are around not being educated enough, I mean, switch on the TV and look at politics, then you see what happens.
100%. And yes, I think we will keep the ARRI educational parts, also cooperation with university that we have ongoing and are very successful. We keep that up. We probably integrate a lot more, and we generally see that as also a social responsibility from us to educate the next generation, to help the next generation also to fulfill their dreams. And we completely understand that not everybody will end up with ARRI cameras, but we believe that a healthy and a fresh and a self-reinventing industry is the basis for all our technology, all our our business and also our passion basically in general, because I think we all do our jobs because we love what we do.
You mentioned Honor before, the partnership, and that's also about accessibility of the ARRI image, right? I mean, we see in the industry there's a couple of other corporations in that field. I think there's Leica doing this with Huawei and now Xiaomi. And actually, I recently learned that this has become one of Leica's most profitable business lines, which is interesting because in a way, I wrote a long article about this, how actually can compare Leica a little bit to ARRI because they're very, very premium products. But somehow they found a way to monetize that lower end through the smartphones. How is like, can you share more about what's planned with the Honor integration?
Well, also that's in an early stage at the moment. We looked at several partnerships already in the past years. We deliberately did not want to go the way of basically selling the badge or making this a one-way street where we give something for return of investment or of cash. But we looked very carefully and went then with Honor as a partner because we believe that can be actually a mutual also technical or strategical benefit. It's for us not about generally the brand and selling the brand, so you will at the moment not find an Honor phone with an ARRI badge on it. But you will see, again, our core competencies. It's about the image, it's about the workflow, it's about the user experience. And at the other side, we see in Honor a very technological company, a very interesting company from their culture and from how they approach the situation that we have at the moment. Also the topic of AI, of integrating, of user interfaces. We believe that there's a very strong potential to nurture both industries with the technologies that we can provide to each other. So we're very much looking forward to this, and the next months and years will hopefully yield fantastic results.
Great. You told the Riedel team that blue will stay blue and Riedel will stay red. So ARRI will continue to operate as a sister company, will stay separate. But how will you maintain genuine independence when the sole owner's entire network, client base, and strategic interests are in broadcast and live production?
I don't see a conflict here, to be honest. I mean, I'm doing my business on the Riedel end for almost 40 years now. We already have various different areas of clients. We are in the broadcast field, we are in the live event field, we have theater business, we even have some industrial and even defense clients. So really different areas of business. And we are able to serve them all. And what the common area is really the technology and the view to do the things right, to build quality products and to do things better than what's in the market already. And we want to continue that. And I see that, therefore, not a conflict of interest. I mean, you certainly have the fact that a resource is only there once and you can put it there or there. But what I do see is that the cinema business as well as the live business, if you call it like that, they mesh more and more anyway. So we do see that this is growing together, and it is a logic that basically then technology platforms are developed which work in both fields and even work in that combined field. So instead of looking at this with a concern and potential conflicts, I would rather turn it completely the other way around and say, we are the enabler to drive this. And that's why I appreciate a concern and take that very seriously. And we always need to double check our strategy. And yes, we will probably also make mistakes here and there. But I think generally speaking, we are doing something which the market needs. And by the way, you started very early with the question of lower-end cameras. Well, someone definitely needs to do the top end anyway, right? Even so, the quantities might be small, but someone needs to do that. And in this field, we believe it's us. That doesn't mean we are not going down as well, but the positioning on the top end is absolutely what we want on the Riedel as well as the ARRI end, and this will not change. And then you see that you also do more.
That's actually a good segue to my last question, which is, imagine it's 2031. That goes to all three of you. So 5 years from now, what does ARRI look like? What are you making? Who are your customers? And what's the thing that ARRI does in 5 years that it couldn't do before you walked through the door?
2031, we're here. We are providing moving images, the media entertainment industry, but moving images in particular, with solutions that make them the best images as efficiently and as comfortably as possible. I think that's the global thing. That's our strategy. That's the main thing that we do. How will that look? It will still be there will still be hardware products. I believe that this is a time frame where there will be hardware products. But I can imagine that the amount of software or services or integrating technologies will be much higher than nowadays. I can very well imagine that a hardware camera is more an entry point into an ecosystem to produce content. Also working hand in hand with virtually produced content. And I'm not only mentioning AI, but just generally everything that is created on computers. I believe that with ARRI we can be exactly this combining tool chain that allows the content producers, the creatives that we discussed before, to make the best images as comfortably as possible and as easy and fast as possible. And how that will look exactly, I think that's the challenge that we have. There's a lot of first tracks that we explore. At ARRI we have the first software products like the Film Lab, where we say, okay, how can we transfer a certain look into virtual environments? We have Luca coming up now, a set of Unreal Engine tools for digital twins, so we can simulate a whole production within Unreal Engine. And all those things might not be a big commercial impact now, but they're exactly the first segues into a more hybrid universe. And this also now explains exactly why we're so much thinking that the Riedel ARRI cooperation is the best that could ever happen, because it's exactly the technologies that we need. Hardware technologies that basically transfer light into images, but then everything around it to make it a good production.
I think it's one fascinating observation that on a high-end set, a lot of things are still very inefficient, right? That's my observation. That's how, especially the communication is just like, how do you even note down what is a good take? How all that is really, it's still like 100 years ago in a way. And I think we see a lot of players trying to do innovation in this field, but the reality is that if another lower end camera manufacturer does it, they don't necessarily use those cameras on set. So it doesn't really make that much of a difference. But in a narrative way, of course, ARRI will be very well positioned to actually help with that and with Riedel.
Absolutely. I mean, it's interesting that with this from film to digital, everybody expected it to be easy and cheaper. It turned out to be the opposite, because there's so much more communication, so many more topics that are managed on set, that crews are getting bigger, more expensive. And people shoot on film, not just because of the aesthetics, but because it's smaller crews. And this is something that is interesting, but it triggers us to say, okay, this is where we change things. And this is where we change things together with networking, with communication. We need to make the set again centric about creative processes, smaller crews, faster working, and all the stuff that is in the background. This should be in the background.
Yeah, so if I totally agree. I mean, at the end, I still think that by 2031, we're going to be the leading equipment manufacturer in the motion picture side for cameras, on the high-end level. We're going to be more approachable, as we already said, going a little bit down in the portfolio, giving easier and earlier access to it. I see us clawing back some of our lighting business. There's going to be exciting new lighting products coming out this year. And that's definitely something that we are going to defend. So high-end motion picture is the DNA of the company, and that's what we are definitely going to do. I also think that we're going to see really enhanced workflows, because at the end of the day, it is about the best image, but it's about the best image in budget and in time. And, while a lot of people talk about dynamic range and the aesthetics and all that, high dynamic range, you obviously as a DP know this very well, gives you more flexibility, gets you to act faster. You're not on edge straight away if lighting conditions shift, which is a fantastic opportunity for ARRI technology in live production, where you cannot control the lighting conditions if you shoot outside, for example. So that is going to give a great opportunity to help the creatives to tell their stories, whether it's scripted or whether it's live. And the workflows are going to make a big difference going forward to be affordable.
If I think 5 years ahead, then for me it's always a continuing story. But really, we have the technologies in the portfolio to make all that work, what the guys said. There will be much more software work than hardware, but I always strongly believed in the combination of hard and software, which is also, there's not too many companies out there which are good in both fields. So that puts us in a good position, because I think we understand both camps. And then, let's continue the journey. Never forget the legacy of our companies, but continue and drive innovations, and we will do that. Be sure about that. But have a look on the journey, ask us in between, and if we lose track a little bit, help us to get back.
We will. Thank you for taking all this time, gentlemen. Appreciate it, and have a good luck at NAB and a lot of, I'm sure, great and positive meetings, I would say.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Thanks everybody for watching. Stay tuned to CineD for a lot of videos from NAB 2026, and see you soon.